The controllers of our world, by whatever other name you want to call them, you know, some people will call them the social engineers, some people will call them the mind controllers, some people will call them the Illuminati. I personally hate that term for them because they're not illuminated ones. You know, the original name of the Illuminati secret society that was formed in Bavaria, Germany, was the Perfectibilis. And that means the perfect ones. Imagine the hubris of these people in this dark occult society, of what many people think was not a dark occult society, was just a typical fraternal order. These people referred to themselves as the perfect ones, the Perfectibilis, you know, and then that name became morphed eventually into Illuminati, the illuminated ones or the enlightened ones. They're neither perfect nor enlightened. Their spirituality is extremely inverted, and they are what I call a dark solar cult. They are, in fact, a sun cult, but in the way that they look at how they are a solar cult is in the form of looking at light or the sun as knowledge. This is what we have to understand about the dark occult. I consider them dark Luciferians because Lucifer simply means in Latin, it comes from the Latin roots lux, meaning light, and fere, meaning to bring or to carry. So it could be seen in one way of looking at it as the light bringer or the carrier of the light of knowledge. And that's what these people see themselves as. They see themselves as being the torchbearers of the light of knowledge of the occult, but it's the way that they use it that makes them a dark solar cult or dark Luciferians. So we have to understand that this is all about the sun as light, and they stem out of the solar cults of the ancient world. All of the astrotheological cults of the ancient world eventually degenerated into dark occult orders that we have today. And the solar cult was no different. We have to understand that the ancient sun-worshipping traditions always looked at the sun as being a journeyer on the zodiacal star, the constellation, the belt of the constellation stars, okay? And these are just backdrops of star clusters, which we call constellations, that the sun visually appears to move through during the course of a solar year. This is visually depicted by the zodiac wheel that is shown here, and the sun at the center of the zodiac wheel makes its way through these 12 houses during the course of a year. So in the ancient world, it was always looked at that the seasons were broken into these four quartering groups of the zodiac, and they were each ruled by a central sign of the season. So the mid sign in the middle of each season, for spring it's Taurus, and that is an earth sign. For summer it is Leo, which is a fire sign. For autumn it is Scorpio, which is a water sign, and for winter it is Aquarius, which is an air sign. Of course, these signs alchemically associate with thoughts, emotions, actions, and then earth being resources. So you have thoughts or mind, mental capabilities being associated with the air sign, emotions, of course, being associated with the sign of water, and the action or will being associated with fire. Then you had earth being associated with resources, innate talents or capabilities or personality characteristics, and what we have at our disposal to work with in the physical world. That was what the earth sign represented alchemically. Of course, the sun in the middle was the fifth element or the quintessence, which represented spirit or light or the spark of the divine, however you want to look at that. So we also have to understand that the cross, that is the vertical and horizontal arms that separate the seasons, represent, of course, the solstices and the equinoxes. This is the journey of the sun throughout the course of the year at its high point, its midpoint, and its low point on the Earth as seen from the northern hemisphere. So these are also the beginnings of each season. The beginning of summer, or the summer solstice at June 20th or 21st, the sun is at the highest point with respect to the Earth's plane of orbit in the northern hemisphere. It is at the Tropic of Cancer, which is approximately 23.5 degrees north latitude, north of the Earth's equator. At both the equinoxes, the spring and autumn equinox, the sun is directly at the equator, so we have equal amounts of day and night, hence the term equinox, meaning equal night. And of course, the beginning of winter, the winter solstice at December 21st or 22nd, the sun is at its lowest point of power with respect to the northern hemisphere. It is at a 23.5 degree south angle, or at the Tropic of Capricorn. Again, these tropics are named as such because the sun is about to enter the house of Cancer at the summer solstice, as you see, and it is about to enter the house of Capricorn at the winter solstice, hence the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, respectively. And we can see that this is the direction that the sun takes during the course of the year. It'll begin at the spring equinox and then progress through into the summer season, and then fall down into the season of autumn. That's why we call it fall, and then progress into the winter season, and then start the cycle all over again. So we have to see the entire zodiacal wheel as the path of the sun and the houses that it passes through during a solar year. Now, what's very interesting about this is where we get the occult holidays, or sabbats, okay? And it's also, what we have to understand about this is why sacrifices are made during a particular time of the year. Why is bloodletting done? Human sacrifice rituals. Traditionally, in ancient occult religions and mindsets, these practices were performed during specific astrological times of the year for very specific reasons. And what I want to show people in this next part of the slide is that the center points of each season are the high holidays. The solstices and equinoxes are considered lesser holidays during the occult year. But right here is the very important parts of the occult year. The very midpoints of the ruling signs that actually are the midpoints of the season. Okay, so right in between the spring equinox and the summer solstice, this midpoint of the house of Taurus, okay, in the midpoint of spring, it is known as, it's on May 1st this takes place, it is known as Beltane or Walpurgisnacht, Saint Walpurgis's night. So this holiday is the point that we're going to be talking about today, particularly because this is the end point of the season of sacrifice. As I'll explain to people, the season of sacrifice actually begins on March 19th, and it's a 40-day period that progresses from March 19th, which is right at the spring equinox, up to, and it goes up to the midpoint of spring, which is May 1st, May Day. Now, May Day is the highest of all the occult holidays. It is considered the beginning, really, or not the beginning of the year, because that's considered the spring equinox, but it is considered the high point of the year because this is the close of the spring season, and all the planting basically has to be done that is going to help with your survival through the course of the year. Because as we'll see, the ancients really only considered that there were 2 seasons, not 4. Okay, they looked at the top of the zodiacal wheel as the season of life and the bottom of the zodiacal wheel as the season of death. Okay, so the midpoints are known as sabbats. Okay, these are important times in the worldviews of dark occultists because they lie at the very center or heart of the season. And the midpoint in summer, known as midsummer or Lammas, is August 1st. And then the autumnal midpoint is October 31st. We know that as Halloween. In the older traditions, it was known as Samhain. And then the winter midpoint is February 2nd, known as Imbolc or Candlemas. We know that in the United States as Groundhog Day, a time of prognostication. Beltane or Walpurgisnacht, May 1st, was a time of renewal, of life, of fertility. And then Lammas or Midsummer was a festival of light, about the sun in the highest point, or probably the strongest power during the course of the year in Leo, around July, August, the dog days of summer. And then the midpoint of autumn is a time of respect and acknowledgement of the dead and death in general, a season that we're getting ready to move into the winter, which is about survival and potentially death. So that's what Halloween or Samhain is all about. So this is the zodiacal wheel breakdown, how the sun passes through it, the solstices and equinoxes, and then the midpoints of each season. So this has everything to do with the occult season of sacrifice, because we have to understand the importance of the beginning of spring to the midpoint of spring. That's the occult season of sacrifice. Okay, so in this next part, just wanted to reiterate that the ancients really only saw two seasons, okay? They saw the season of life, in which the sun is really in the northern hemisphere, above the 0-degree point. And that is from the beginning of spring, or the spring equinox, around March 19th or 20th, to the beginning of autumn, in which it's at the 0-degree point at the equator, and moving southward into the southern hemisphere. And when it's in the northern hemisphere, that's when food can be planted and grown in the northern hemisphere, because the sun is favoring us at that point. It's facing the northern hemisphere because of the Earth's tilt at a 23.5 degree axis with respect to its plane of orbit around our sun. And then, of course, the season of death is the opposite of this. It is the time when the sun is in the southern hemisphere. I'm sorry, folks, I feel a sneeze coming on. It didn't manifest. That's even worse than it actually happening, as we all know. I apologize. So at this point, the sun is in the southern hemisphere, and crops do not grow in the northern hemisphere during this time. So this is the time that we have to be prepared for survival by stockpiling food because of the Earth's axial tilt. And this is why there's such a attitude of scarcity instead of a mindset and paradigm of abundance in our world. Because of the dynamics of our planet with respect to our star, we have to basically do all of our planting, growing, and most of our harvesting during the season of life, and then stockpile stores of food during the so-called season of death, because in the northern hemisphere, where the greatest amount of the human population lies, food does not grow in the northern hemisphere when the sun is in the southern hemisphere. So those are considered the two seasons. And here you see them here, where you have spring and summer represented in the top path of the sun during the year, where it's progressing from the equator up to the summer solstice. And then when it hits the autumn equinox, it progresses down into the season of death. They're depicted on the right-hand side. And life and growth only happens during those two seasons on the left-hand side, spring and summer. So, sorry again, folks. Just have to bear through this. Been triggered with allergies during the week because of some exposure to dust during an early spring cleaning of my place, and my immune system doesn't seem to have been prepared for the amount of dust that I was exposed to, so I'm struggling a little bit. Again, my apologies. We'll just power through it. So you see there, the Tropic of Cancer is right at the summer solstice, when the sun is at its high point at a 23.5 degree angle with respect to the Earth's plane of orbit, above the equator. And then at the Tropic of Capricorn, that's when the sun is at the winter solstice at approximately 23.5 degrees south latitude. It's a very good visual depiction of the path at the sun. It's this snake-like path, or a sine wave type path that the sun makes during the course of a year with respect to the Earth's plane of orbit. It's called the ecliptic. If you want to look it up, that's the visual path of the sun with respect to the Earth's equator. Okay, so let's get into what the season of sacrifice really is and why it's so important for us to understand. So to understand when the season of sacrifice is, quote, celebrated by the dark occultists of our world, we have to look at, again, the sun's positioning with respect to the Earth. So here we're seeing the three times of the year when the sun is either at the high point, the low point, or the midpoint. Okay, so again, we've looked at this when we looked at the zodiacal wheel. The sun makes its progression from the winter solstice, its lowest point of power, up through the spring equinox at March 19th or 20th, where it hits the equator, and then continuing during its course upward into the northern hemisphere. It then goes to the Tropic of Cancer at 23.5 degrees north latitude. When it is at the equator, that is the equinox, okay? And it is neither favors the northern or southern hemisphere. It is directly in line with the Earth's equator. Now, this is seen, the zodiacal trek is clearly seen in the Masonic first degree tracing board. But you have to turn the board over onto its side. Now, I did this when I covered the symbolism of Freemasonry, because they're telling you this visually in code, because the floor of the Temple of Solomon depicted in the first degree tracing board is actually the Earth with its latitude and longitudinal lines, okay? And then the pillars are the equator. The middle pillar is the equator, and then the northern pillar is the pillar of Joachim when the sun is at the highest point of power. And there you see it visually depicted at the high point that the initiates have to climb up the ladder to get to the knowledge, to get to the light, to get to the sun, okay? And that's at the summer solstice. Then the dark pillar, the pillar of Boaz, is at the winter solstice. So this would represent the sun at the Tropic of Capricorn. So you're seeing these pillars represent respectively the solstice points and the equinox point. Okay, the equinox points when the sun is at the equator. So that's the balance point, and that's why the all-seeing eye is at that point. So the third day after the spring equinox point, the actual center point of the sun, when the sun is directly in line with the equator, is a very important time period for the dark occult in particular. This is March 22nd, and it's a very important day during the occult year. Okay, there's even an entire secret society / fraternal order that is named after this date. We'll get to that in the next slide. But this is the sun's relative position to the Earth's equator, to the Earth's equatorial line, or the ecliptic, as viewed from the Earth, when the sun is positioned at March 22nd. It breaks fully the equatorial line, okay? So the whole disk of the sun, instead of being split right in the middle, has now fully passed the equatorial line. This is then what they say is the sun has actually completely risen after 3 days, okay? Because, you know, being in the tomb for 3 zodiacal houses, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, from its lowest point, it is in the tomb for 3 days, and then it rises up from that point to come out of the tomb or be resurrected so that it can rejuvenate life in the northern hemisphere, give life to the earth. This is where the whole Christ mythos comes out of, the solar savior mythos. Okay, so on the third day after the spring equinox, the sun fully breaks past the equator and thus fully emerges from its tomb of the southern hemisphere. This symbolically represents Lucifer, the light bringer, or the carrier of light, the bringer of light, rising from the dead to begin his journey toward his highest point of power at the summer solstice. Again, Lucifer is 2 Latin roots, lux meaning light and ferre meaning to bring or to carry. These high and low points of light may also be seen in the cryptic tracing board of Tubal-Cain, shown below. So here you see in the Tubal-Cain tracing board of Freemasonry, you only see the 2 seasons, the season of life when the sun is favoring the northern hemisphere there at the top, when the sun has come out of, emerged symbolically from its tomb. And then you see the tomb below representing the sun in the southern hemisphere, or the season of death. Okay, and when we understand this symbolism, and it's all related to the sun, and then we can really decode a lot of secret society symbolism that uses this. Okay, so one of the main secret societies that uses this type of symbolism is the Order of Skull and Bones. It's a Yale University secret society, also known as the Order of the Scroll and Key. It's a clandestine Masonic lodge, lodge number 322, taken for the date March 22nd, which is the most significant date in their whole dark occult symbolism, because of it representing the emergence of light. Okay, and it's dark light as they use it. As we'll see, this is the cult of the dark sun, or the black sun as it is known. Die Schwarze Sun was a secret society in Nazi Germany, which I'm going to actually talk about a little bit later, which was a central secret society within another secret society known as the SS, or the Schutzstaffel. Die Schwarze Sun was run by Hans Kammler, the most powerful occultist of the Third Reich, along with some of the technological sorcerers like Hans Kammler. So March 22nd is considered the actual rising of the sun out of the tomb. And again, the Order of Skull and Bones in Yale has its headquarters at a place called the Tomb. They're telling you that they're not the ones rising from the tomb, they're ones in the tomb, in the season of death, death worshippers. Their whole symbolism is the symbolism of death, the skull and the crossbones. This is a symbol of death or poison. Okay, and it represents symbolically thoughts and actions, but divorced from the emotions of heart-based intelligence. Again, thoughts take place in the skull, actions take place with the bones or the limbs. Okay, but there is no heart in this image. Okay, the heart is missing. Okay, so the emotional aspect is missing, but you have the intellect combined with the will to act. That is what makes them a dark occult society. And that's what makes anyone really turned over to the darkness, turned over to the dark aspects of the occult. But to go back to the explanation of the season of sacrifice, so we understand that, the 322 Lodge, the Order of Skull and Bones, they have their headquarters at Yale University, and it's called the Tomb. Okay, so we see this also, the symbolism of the skull and bones is also on the 3rd degree tracing board. We looked at 2 other tracing boards in the former slide, the 1st degree and the tracing board of Tubal Cain. But the 3rd degree tracing board is all about death and resurrection. Death and resurrection of the sun, or of the soul. Okay, our sun's name is soul, its scientific name, meaning one or unity. Okay, so the 3rd degree tracing board, depicted on the left-hand side of this image, shows the skull and bones imagery again, and warns us about the 3 murderers of the Masonic Christ figure, Hiram Abiff, who is killed by the 3 destroyers of consciousness: ignorance, apathy, and cowardice. That's what puts him in his tomb, okay, where the sun goes into the tomb of the southern hemisphere. And then there is a hope of resurrection, represented by the sprig of acacia growing at the top of the coffin there, the symbolic tomb. The tools that killed Hiram Abiff there below the depiction of the floor of the house and the pillars, and you have Hiram Abiff's name and numbers depicted on the plaque on the coffin. So Hiram Abiff is the figure that symbolically dies and then is resurrected back to life. He is the Masonic Christ figure. So I also have written here on this slide, we must always be on guard against these 3 insidious destroyers of spiritual awareness: ignorance, apathy, and cowardice/laziness. The ignorance destroys our thoughts, apathy destroys our emotions or care, and cowardice and laziness destroys our will to act. So in the Christian tradition, you also see a time of sacrifice, or a time to make a sacrifice to God, to creation, however you want to look at it. But this time period before Easter is just a proxy of the true season of sacrifice. Again, that's what Christians did. They took things that were active, like active communion through some type of psychedelic or entheogenic substance, which was given to initiates to change their consciousness for real. And they made a proxy of it and give them a communion wafer that's inert, that doesn't actually change consciousness, but you're supposed to just see it symbolically as the, quote, body of Christ. So Lent, just like everything else in the modern Christian tradition, is simply a psychological proxy for the real thing. The real season of sacrifice is this dark occult aspect of actual human blood sacrifice that I'm going to be talking about. So in the pagan sun-worshipping traditions, animal and sometimes human sacrifices were often offered during the 40 days between the spring equinox and the midpoint of spring, or May Day, May 1st, Beltane. So this is the planting season. This is when the seeds have to basically go in the ground. When we're coming up to, it's no longer cold, the weather is changing, it's starting to get warm, it's starting to become seasonally like spring weather, like right now. And we have to get the plants and crops planted in the ground. We have to get those seeds in the ground now, because that's when they're going to start to actually sprout and eventually grow and bear fruit and vegetables, and get us through the time of the season of death, when the sun goes into the southern hemisphere. So they looked at it like from now till the actual midpoint of the season is the planting season. And if they considered it in the ancient world that if they were to give some type of a valuable sacrifice of something that was extremely valued, namely young life, okay, to the earth and the sun and the spirit of the earth and the sun, that those, quote, spirits or consciousnesses would look favorably upon human beings, and then it would ensure a bountiful harvest come harvest time during the autumn. So that is the root of this occult tradition of sacrifice. Now, when the actual season of sacrifice officially begins is on 322. March 22nd to May 1st, if you actually count those days, it is 40 days. Now, this is a significant biblical number religiously. The 40 days between March 22nd and May 1st are the official season of sacrifice. Now, again, sometimes it begins slightly early. They usually observe the time leading up to it, especially the 3 days leading up to it, as almost included in the season of sacrifice. So I often consider the real beginning of the season of sacrifice March 19th. March 19th is a very significant day in the occult. Okay, if you actually follow this and study it and read into it, you'll see that March 19th is a day that dark occultists do a lot of activity. Okay, I was actually initiated into the Church of Satan as a priest. Again, I don't know where the rumor is coming from that I ever claimed to be a, quote, high priest, or to be, quote, high up in the Church of Satan. No one can ever produce any such record of me saying that, because I've never said it. Okay, I admittedly was a very low-level initiate in the Church of Satan. I was inducted into it as a priest, however, under the name Mark Rokar, which I've repeatedly explained through different presentations and other material, that I did not join the Church of Satan as Mark Passio. I hated my family name then, because I was very much at odds with my family and family members, and I joined it under an assumed name, which I took from the Gnostic text, the Pistis Sophia, or the Faith Wisdom, as it is called in Gnosticism, after a demon that is after my birth sign of Leo, named Rokar. So that is where I got the name that I joined the Church of Satan with, and I was appointed to the position of basic priest within that organization, not high priest. There was only one high priest, and only ever is one high priest of the Church of Satan. At the time that I was initiated into it, it was, or given that rank, it was Anton LaVey, who passed away the following year. But he actually appointed me himself in the year 1996. So, to go back to this, this is the time of the year where we have to be very vigilant for false flag terror attacks and potential human sacrifice rituals. Okay, 40 days is a significant symbolic time period in biblical and occult terms. Okay, and here we see visually the actual 1/8 of the year in red, shown there in the bottom right-hand corner, that the actual season of sacrifice takes place from the spring equinox, March 19th, but actual beginning, the official beginning, you could say, is 322, March 22nd, through to May 1st, the midpoint of spring, or Walpurgisnacht. Okay, so that is the season of sacrifice time. Now, what happens during this time is many different potential false flags and blood ritual events are carried out during this time period. And it's March 17th today. So I'm telling people right now, they also love Tuesdays, folks. Okay, so March 19th is going to be falling on Tuesday of this week. Tuesday is mercredi in French, and it is, I'm sorry, it is not mercredi, it is mardi, M-A-R-D-I in French, and that is after Mars, the god of war. Okay, so it's the god of war, and martial arts comes from Mars. That is the death arts. Okay, the arts of death, martial law, all related to Mars. March 19th, Mars. Mars is month, Mars is day. They love it when it falls on a Tuesday as well. Okay, so I'm just letting everybody know, you better watch March 19th this year. Okay, and you better watch March 22nd. That's going to fall on a Friday this year. Okay, they love Fridays as well to do occult rituals because it's the goddess's day. Okay, Freya in the Norse tradition, from where we get Friday. Okay, a lot of these rituals, you'll notice goddess names in them. You will notice also king. They like the killing of the goddess and the killing of the king. It's killing of sovereignty. Okay, killing of nature, killing of the sacred feminine, and killing of sovereignty. This is all encoded into these rituals. Okay, now I made a rudimentary list the first time I did this, but I put together a slightly more extensive list now, and I have 28 blood rituals and dates that I want to go over that have taken place during the season of sacrifice. Okay, so we'll go all the way back to the American Revolutionary period, and a lot of this is revenge for that time. A lot of these events that take place, especially in the United States, are direct revenge for the initiation of the hostilities against the crown, to get them out of our lives. Okay, and the battles of Lexington and Concord, which were the opening volleys of the American Revolution, which took place at Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts. I went up to Lexington Green a few years ago with my band, the Founders, and we took pictures at Lexington Green, which is where the quote "shot heard round the world" took place, which was the opening shots of the American Revolution. This happened on April 19th, 1775, okay, even before the signing of the Declaration of Independence over a year later. So this is one of the things that they particularly want to do things on April 19th as well. So March 19th is important, March 22nd is important, and April 19th, and as we're going to see, April 20th. So you have to watch March 19th, March 22nd, April 19th, and April 20th for specific reasons. Now, I think they started early this year with this mosque shooting. Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit, and the symbolism that accompanied it, and the manifesto that accompanied it. Okay, and they chose the Ides of March, another very symbolic day, because it's the killing of the emperor. Okay, killing of the king. You're going to see this over and over again. You know, the murder of Gaius Julius Caesar took place on the Ides of March. That's where we get. That's why that's a commemorated date. And he was murdered by the Roman Senate members and, of course, his friend Brutus. Okay, so let's move on to the next blood ritual date, which was a blood ritual sacrifice event. which was the Great Boston Fire. Now, you'll say, okay, there's natural disasters and events in this list. Yes, there are, but that is not to say that they may have not been actual machinations by social engineers and dark occult orders. You know, it is very possible for fires, wildfires that spread like that, to be done by human beings. So the Boston Fire, which destroyed a large portion of the city of Boston, March 20th, 1760, okay, one day after March 19th. And really they burned for a few days, right through to March 22nd. This was, of course, Boston, Massachusetts, the Great Boston Fire. The riots in Baltimore, a big event in the Civil War era, took place in Baltimore, Maryland, April 19th, 1861. So again, there you have that April 19th day again. You'll see that over and over, okay? The San Francisco earthquake and fires in San Francisco, California, April 18th, 1906. The sinking of the Titanic, which was absolutely an occult ritual sacrifice, namely to murder high-ranking members of the Astor family, because the Astors were some of the industrialists in the United States that stood vehemently opposed to the creation and institution of the Federal Reserve System, the Federal Reserve banking cartel system here in the United States, which has been since that time, since 1913, been the central bank of the United States, which issues the fiat currency and controls the interest rates on our currency here in the United States, and is devaluing the currency like nobody's business. The Titanic went down in the North Atlantic Ocean, certainly by sabotage, and this happened April 14th, 1912, within the time period of the season of sacrifice. The Shusha Armenian massacre in Shusha, Azerbaijan, took place on March 22nd, the beginning of the season of sacrifice in the year 1920. The Katyn massacre. Sorry, folks, my producer is needs to inform me about something. No worries.
You're back.
Okay. I was just informed that my volume was just a little bit low. He wanted me to pull the mic a little bit closer, so that's done. Hopefully the pop filter is working and it is not interfering with volume too much. So, the Katyn massacre in Katyn, Belarus by the Nazis took place during the Nazi occupation in that area of the world, March 22nd, 1943. So you're seeing things right on the dates that I'm talking about. April 19th, March 22nd. These are dates that are very important to the dark occultists. Okay, here's another killing of the king ritual. Okay, Martin Luther King Jr. assassination in Memphis, Tennessee. Again, Memphis was the capital city of Egypt. So now you're seeing, you know, Egyptian symbology mixed in with the killing of the king ritual, which is about the murder of sovereignty, and of course murder of a very high-level political activist. April 4th, 1968, during the season of sacrifice. The beginning of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army's car bombing sprees, took place in Belfast, Ireland on March 19th, 1972. That was the very first of the IRA car bombings. The Waco massacre here in the United States, in which federal agents burned an entire church full of people, took place in Waco, Texas, and that was the siege of the Waco church took place April 19th, 1993. Again, April 19th, the anniversary of the Battle of Lexington and Concord, battles of Lexington and Concord, the opening volleys of the American Revolution. The Oklahoma City bombing took place in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, April 19th, 1995, 2 years after Waco. Okay, so again, anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, which began the American Revolution. The Heaven's Gate cult suicides, in which like 70-some people willfully sacrificed themselves as part of this UFO cult. I'm sorry, I skipped one. Let me go back. The Port Arthur massacre. And here's another killing of the king ritual. Arthur, okay? Camelot, King Arthur. Port Arthur massacre at Port Arthur, Tasmania, Australia, April 28th, 1996. This is the ritual killing that led to the taking away of battle rifles from the Australians, okay, which unfortunately fell for this and gave up their rights to self-defensive weapons that are like military weapons. These are certainly weapons that should be in the possession of all human beings to be able to defend themselves against the tyranny of government. And unfortunately, the Australians gave up that right, let it be taken from them because of their fear following the Port Arthur massacre, which was clearly a false flag event. April 28th, 1996. The Heaven's Gate cult suicides, again, a cult in Rancho, Santa Fe, California, that all committed suicide simultaneously at the behest of a couple of cult leaders. Probably a monarch mind control ritual event. Okay, this took place March 26th, 1997, right in the season of sacrifice. The West Side Middle School massacre in Jonesboro, Arkansas, took place March 24th, 1998. Now here we start the school shooting sprees. Okay, we're in the modern age, and now they want the guns in America real bad. Port Arthur was the Aussies gun confiscation event, and now they're going to continue to try to do it in the United States, and we'll see many of these. So moving to the next slide, going from the first 14, now we're going to the second 14 events. The Columbine school shootings. Again, here we have goddess symbolism. Kalum means the dove, and the dove is always associated symbolically and ritualistically with the goddess or care. The Holy Spirit is depicted as a dove, and in many goddess traditions, it used dove symbolism. The word Kalum in French means dove, so Columbine means place of the dove. Okay, so it's again a goddess ritual, a goddess sacrifice ritual. Okay, so this was in Columbine, Colorado, April 20th, 1999. You will also see the date April 20th come up in many of these events. Okay, so that is Hitler's birthday. Okay, they love venerating other members of the dark occult. While Hitler was not what I would consider a high-level dark occultist, he certainly was doing the bidding of dark occultists during the machinations that took place during World War II. The Iraq shock and awe bombings, which began the Iraq War, took place in Baghdad, Iraq, March 19th, 2003, the very beginning of the season of sacrifice. The Red Lake Senior High School shooting in Red Lake, Minnesota, March 21st, 2005. The Virginia Tech School Massacre in Blacksburg, Virginia, April 16th, 2007. The Binghamton Immigration Center shootings in Binghamton, New York, April 3rd, 2009. The Moscow Metro bombings in Moscow, Russia, March 29th, 2010. One of the biggest goddess/nature killing events, killing of aspects of the earth and destruction of the environment, Mother Nature. Okay, the BP oil spill, which is one of the largest environmental disasters in human history in the Gulf of Mexico, April 20th, 2010, Hitler's birthday. The United States' invasion of Libya, March 19th, 2011. See, they love March 19th, folks. I'm telling you, they start wars on March 19th. This is the day they start wars. Okay, Iraq, shock and awe bombings, invasion of Libya, both on March 19th, the unofficial beginning of the season of sacrifice. But that's when they like to do dark ceremony magic, for sure. They like mass human sacrifice rituals on that day. The Oikos University shooting in Oakland, California, April 2nd, 2012. The Boston Marathon bombing in Boston, Massachusetts, April 15th, 2013. I told people that year be vigilant of a season of sacrifice event, and there it was, Boston Marathon. I've pretty much called the rest of these. I've told people since these events here to be on the lookout for these events. The Fort Hood military base shooting just outside of Fort Hood, Texas, took place April 2nd, 2014. Now, over these 2 years in 2016 and 17, you had things happen right on March 22nd, at the very beginning, official beginning of the season of sacrifice. The Brussels bombings in Brussels, Belgium, March 22nd, 2016. And the Westminster attacks just outside of Westminster Abbey in London, March 22nd, 2017. The Stockholm truck attack in Stockholm, Sweden, April 7th, 2017. These are only the ones that I've researched. These are only the ones that I think are worth mentioning. There's probably countless others during this time period. Okay, you could look into it for yourself and probably tell me many that I've missed. Okay, but people will say this is confirmation bias. You're trying to find what you want to see. No, this is how these ritualists in dark occultism operate. They like their ritual, they like their ceremony, they like their repetition. They use techniques that work. The techniques are not seen by the average individual, and therefore they have no reason to modify their techniques. This is something we're going to talk about in the Divide and Conquer section when we talk about infighting and division in the freedom movement. These social engineers don't have to modify their technique because they continue to work. I want to make a couple of honorable mentions that are almost like laughable, almost like a joke. But the inauguration of Pope Francis took place at the exact day when all of the dark occultists basically in the world initiate their higher level initiates. Okay? Again, this is the very date in 1996 that I was initiated as a priest in the Church of Satan. Now you have one of the high priests of the dark occult, the quote Pope, who's really doing the bidding of the Black Pope, and other high-ranking dark occultists, this communist scumbag, okay, Pope Francis. You're a communist scumbag, Francis, okay? Inaugurated as Pope March 19th, 2013. Again, I still have an open-ended challenge to this fucking punk, okay? Fight me in the octagon, all right? I've called you out and you're ducking me, okay? Because, you can't win an intellectual battle with me. I'll really mop the floor with you. I'm giving you a fighting chance, man. Just get in the cage with me, okay? That'll be your best bet against me, okay? That'll be your best option. I'll try to take it easy on you. But again, he's ducking my challenge, I don't know whether he's a little out of shape or what, or he's just scared, but the challenge is open-ended, so anytime, let me know. And probably the worst false flag of all time, daylight saving time signed into law, March 19th, 1918. That might be the most serious of all these events. All kidding aside, folks, I really shouldn't be joking like that, but daylight savings time is pretty terroristic. But in all seriousness, like we have this mosque shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, which took place a couple of days ago, on the Ides of March. And I apologize. Felt good though. You look at the occult. Sorry, folks. You look at the occult symbolism that took place here, that is in place in this ritual shooting in New Zealand. And what do we have here on the shooter's manifesto and on the shooter's body armor? We have, lo and behold, we have the symbolism from the inner sanctum of the Nazi occult regime known as Die Schwarzsonne, the Black Sun, the symbol of the solar zodiacal 12 houses of the zodiac, represented by 12 inverted Sieg runes from the Norse runic tradition, the tradition of runes. Okay, The rune of Sieg means victory, but moreover, in a deeper connotation, occultically, the Sieg rune actually means victorious life. But it doesn't really just mean winning or conquering. That's how people traditionally see this. But the deep connotation, symbolically, of the Sieg rune is a victorious, harmonious life. Live when one aligns our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions to natural law. We are victorious. We live a victorious life. It was originally a symbol of good fortune and alignment with natural law, which creates a victorious life. It's the Norse equivalent of the Ankh of ancient Egypt, or Kemet, okay, from the Cometian tradition, which was also a symbol of harmonious life lived in harmony, fortuitous and harmonious life lived in harmony with natural law. It did not mean eternal life, as many people believe that it does. So here we see the Nazis were famous. They turned the swastika around, okay, which was originally a symbol from the Indus Valley traditions, okay, near India, which meant, again, a harmonious and fortuitous life. People just like oversimplify it as good luck, but this was the Indus Valley tradition of a life lived in harmony with natural law. What did the Nazis do? They inverted it. The original looks like two twos, okay, put together. The Nazis turned it around so it looked like two S's, turning it backwards, okay? And the Sieg rune here is seen in its incorrect configuration. It is not set up like a 2 here. It should be set up like an S. So they have inverted the Sieg 12 times to create this symbol representing the black sun, okay? Knowledge used for manipulation and control, okay? Not used for the proper purpose of the uplift of humanity and higher level consciousness. Now, in this guy's manifesto, obviously this guy is a shill, a dupe. You know, he's a mind-controlled monarch. This is obviously a false flag event to get the guns from the citizens of New Zealand, okay? In my estimation. There are people who will debate that, okay? This guy did this for stated political purposes, saying he wanted to create division in the entire political spectrum and have the left wing want to confiscate the guns and the right wing want to, basically start a civil war over that, okay? And that will happen because, again, I've talked about it endlessly. In a Hegelian dialectic, only one side needs to be manipulated. Once they take the bait, it's on. That's why it's so important to understand the dialectic before you take the bait, okay? Because you can't just say, oh, they're manipulated, let them keep doing what they're doing. Eventually, the other side's going to have to stop them. That's why we can't fall into this polarization, and we can't fall for these polarization dialectics, okay? So he basically openly admits in his manifesto, which he called the Great Replacement Toward a New Society, that he wants to create this political polarization through this act, and that's why he chose the semi-automatic battle rifle to do this mass killing event. And again, the symbolism he's choosing is directly out of the dark occult, okay? And there it is. It's called the Sigil of the Black Sun. This was used in Die Schwarzsun Secret Society, which was actually the center of the Schutzstaffel, which was considered another secret society, an elite. It was called the Protection Squadron, Hitler's own secret police, which was known as the SS, the Schutzstaffel. And this is an inner order of the Schutzstaffel set up by Heinrich Himmler himself, who was one of the master occultists of the Third Reich. And this is the symbol that he had put on the floor at Wewelsburg Castle in Bavaria, Germany, which he was going to set up as the temple to the Nazi New World Order, okay? And that's the symbolism that is actually put into the floor there at Wewelsburg Castle. And I talked about this in my presentation called Demystifying the Occult Part 2, Satanism and the Dark Occult, in which I referred to the entirety of dark occultism as the cult of the Black Sun. See, we have to understand, folks, they don't have a name. You know, they don't call themselves the Illuminati. You know, they don't call themselves the dark occult. You know, they don't have a name for themselves. This is a cult without a name. You could look at it as, okay? I like the term the Black Sun, or the cult of the Black Sun, because it very accurately describes what it is. It's the knowledge being used for the complete opposite or inversion, the inverted purpose of what knowledge should be used for, which is to uplift human consciousness and bring people up in awareness of who they are and what's going on within and around them. Dark occultists want to do the opposite. They want to hold knowledge very tightly to themselves so that in other people's ignorance, that places them in a position of power over them because they are knowledgeable and the people below them are completely ignorant because they don't have the knowledge that they do. And that's why it is the sun or light or knowledge wielded as a weapon, hence the black sun, the dark sun. Okay? And that is Set, the Egyptian goddess, the Egyptian god of death and the god of the dark aspect of the sun. Okay, it's where we get the word sunset from. Okay, Horus is considered the rising sun. Amen or Ra is considered the sun at its zenith or apex, which was like a creator god when the sun is at its highest point of light. And then Set is the sun on the western horizon as it is going into its tomb each night as it sets below the horizon line. And symbolically in the Egyptian or Cometian tradition, Set and Horus did battle in the underworld after the sun set, and Horus would defeat Set each night and emerge victorious on the eastern horizon, Horus's zone, the zone of Horus. It's where we get the word horizon from. Okay, so whatever you want to label the dark occult as, the cult of the Black Sun is just as good as any other name because, again, we're giving them these names. They're not giving themselves these names, okay? You know, the Bilderberg group is not the name that they refer to themselves as, okay? It kind of stuck with them because they started it at the Bilderberg Hotel, but that's not the name that they came together with, okay? That's just how it started, and then the name stuck, okay? But they don't really have a name. Okay, they are a worldwide network that is connected in multifaceted ways in their aims and their goals. That's what we have to understand. You know, it's not just one group either. People will be like, oh, it's all the Freemasons, it's all the Jesuits. No, it's not all one group. It's a vast array of interconnected orders and societies. You know, and that's why people don't get the truth about this. It's not simplistic. It's actually quite complicated how the dark occult operates. You know, it cannot be reduced and oversimplified. And that's what little children want to do. You know, they want to look at something and say, it's all the Freemasons, you know, oh, it's all Opus Dei, it's all the Vatican. No, it's a lot of dark occult orders working together and their membership working together because they're unified in their goals. They're on the same page in their ideology and their goals. And that's why they're so effective, and that's why they're kicking our ass. Because they're on the same page and we're completely divided.